GDLS Canada, an industry leader dedicated to supporting our customers and the community.
My name is Bruce Logan. They call me Doc while I was playing lacrosse. I'm now 61 years old. I was born in May 25th, 1960 in St. John, New Brunswick. I've lived most of my life in St. John, New Brunswick with brief interludes in Fredericton at UNB and Laval in Quebec City. My first introduction to lacrosse was in the late 60s watching a TV program that showed us how to make homemade lacrosse sticks. And it was Javex bottles cut out, the face of it cut out, with broomsticks taped to it. I think all the mothers in the neighborhood were kind of wondering why all the Javex disappeared. So when we first started and we're playing in the schoolyards around our neighborhood, one of the things that was interesting was we made our own equipment and our own nets. We would scrounge around to find any pipes or 2x4s, and being in St. John on the Bay of Fundy, we had local fishermen that would give us their nets. And so we'd throw the nets over this and nail it on. And some of the homemade equipment, of course, we had hockey shoulder pads. But again, our parents were probably looking for their National Geographics, because we were using those to tape to our forearms. And it was kind of interesting to see, again, this ragtag bunch of kids out having a great time playing full contact lacrosse with no real equipment. So we're running around the neighborhood playing lacrosse with this. And my father saw this, and he worked with a fellow that had moved to New Brunswick from Orangeville, a real lacrosse hotbed. The next thing we know, a trunk load of sticks ended up in our driveway. And they're given out to all the local kids. And for a year or two, lacrosse was much like ball hockey or street hockey. It was played throughout the neighborhoods, behind the church, behind the schools, out on the street, and it was a real interesting time. So my brother David, he started playing lacrosse, and I piggybacked right on him. His little brother followed him around, and he was very instrumental in my development. And again, he and all his friends, who were quite a bit older than I was, were playing unorganized lacrosse. We painted lines in a tennis court, much to the city's chagrin, and we started playing in an outdoor box. And so as a 12 or 13-year-old, I'm playing with 16 and 17-year-olds, and I was getting my comeuppance just about every day. But my first introduction to competitive lacrosse was a Nepean Team was coming through St. John, I believe on its way to Halifax, and I was asked to join a bunch of kids from across the city to put a team together to play. And this would have been Pee Wee. And so here's a ragtag bunch of kids in cut-off jeans and different colored helmets and different gloves, homemade equipment, and we're out on the floor, and out comes Nepean. And they've got this beautiful warm-up routine. They've got matching socks and helmets and shorts and jerseys, and it was like, wow, like this is pretty cool. Well, they gave us pretty good shellackings, and needless to say, and I was certainly not mad at them, but I was very mad at myself that we were so bad, and it really fostered a competitive spirit for me to get better. It was just a one-off game that they dropped into St. John on their way through, and they were gracious. They gave us some gifts. I still have the emblem that they had. My brother and I played, from the schoolyards in the late 60s, early 70s, right through the late 70s, early 80s. We had played in a junior Maritime Circuit, which was it was a lot of fun. The circuit was St. John, Fredericton came in later, Sackville, New Brunswick, Caraquet, New Brunswick, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Charlottetown PEI. And we would play mini tournaments every weekend in a different location. So it made for those summers, it made for a lot of fun, a lot of camaraderie, got to know a lot of our competitors, and it really fostered the love for the game. I've been in the financial business for close to 30 years. In St. John, New Brunswick, I've developed a practice, independent financial advice practice, and it's been good. It's given me lots of flexibility to do other activities, such as volunteering and whatnot. So as a player, after the Nepean experience, I really wanted to get involved at a more competitive level, hence the junior circuit. And that took me down a road of playing in the 1977 Canada Games in St. John's, Newfoundland, as well as 2 Founders Cups tournament in Sarnia, Ontario, and Montreal, Quebec. The Founders Cup was quite an experience. So after I was a player, I started getting involved in the administration of the sport. And as the 1985 Canada Games that were held in St. John, New Brunswick approached, the Canada Games Society, St. John Canada Games Society, approached me to be their competition director. Well, as a mid-20-something-year-old, it was an honor to do so, and kind of thrown into the deep end, never having organized a tournament or that sort of thing. And so that was my first foray into volunteering and having an administrative role. And with that role, I oversaw the equipment committee, the officials committee, the disciplinary committee, the media. It was a pretty all-encompassing role for the on-site, on the venue. In those games, actually, we had tremendous support from the public. Every night, standing room only, and it happened to be the last Canada Games that Lacrosse was in until a couple of years, or next year, I guess, 2022, it's coming back, which I feel is very, very important because it was the 1973 Games which were a catalyst for a lot of the players around our neck of the woods that drove lacrosse between 73 and 85. So that 1985 Canada Games as competition director was a big honor, a big role, and a lot of fun. From there, lacrosse pretty much disappeared in the minor level, minor lacrosse, after the Canada Games. And it didn't resurface until 2001 when I was asked to be a part of an organizing committee to get minor lacrosse going again. And we were starting from ground zero. We had no assets, we had no substantial culture in the region of lacrosse, and so we planned for the better part of a year, and in 2002 we launched the Fundy Lacrosse Association with over 650 kids, which was quite a feat in itself, and perhaps I'll hold that story back until another moment. From there, then the following year, we started Lacrosse New Brunswick, and I became the director on the CLA for New Brunswick from 2002 through 2009 or 10. I ended with the Canadian Lacrosse Association as the Vice President of Domestic Development in 2009. Through 2002 to 2010, I coached from Tyke to Bantam. I refereed hundreds of games, and enjoyed every single minute of it. As a coach, I was the head coach of the inaugural Bantam Nationals team for Team New Brunswick, And that was probably one of the highlights of my life. I love coaching. Administrative side of it, I wouldn't have given up anything, but the coaching part was so much fun. Well, I'd have to say the best player that I ever played with was my brother, David. He, if he could have only put the ball in the net more, as opposed to hitting the post every time he shot. But he understood the game more than most people from our neck of the woods. He was a basketball player as well, so he really was able to integrate those skills. And as far as the best player that I may have coached, there were a number, but a couple come to mind. A young fella named Johnny Newman, tremendous skills. Every waking minute he was down at the schoolyard, pounding the ball against the wall, and lived with his lacrosse stick. And over the years that paid off, and he ended up playing in university, and he was recruited to go down to the States to a prep school for a while. So it was quite a joy to see some of these players that we coached move on to bigger and better things. I've had many relationships throughout the years, from 1985 as an administrator and a player. I think one of the biggest influences for me and a lot of my fellow players was a gentleman called Bill Mcbain. Bill traveled the country with his work, province to province, so year over year. And wherever he landed, he was promoting lacrosse, putting on lacrosse clinics, doing whatever he could do to help the kids, help the players, help the organizers. And in 1974 or 5, he put on a clinic in Chatham, New Brunswick. That's the first time I met him. Fast forward several decades, I got reacquainted with Bill at the CLA board table. And he was a giant in the coaching committee. He drove so many initiatives. He was truly a legend. Across the country, we have a lot of differences between the regions. The biggest difference is the culture of the game. Southern Ontario has a tremendous culture with thousands and thousands of former players, coaches. Lower Mainland BC, a rich culture in BC with senior A, junior A, professional lacrosse. And then, when you get to some of the prairie provinces and the Atlantic region, it's very much a different story in that we didn't have the growth and sustained growth to develop the culture. And that presented a number of different challenges, from new areas trying to start up lacrosse, needing a tremendous amount of support, whether it be technical support through videos, through coaching clinics, referee clinics, to finding parents who would step up to volunteer to coach who had never played the game. So there are different areas of the country have their unique challenges. And we really saw that at the CLA level in one particular meeting where a gentleman called Dwayne Bratt from Calgary was tasked to put together a national long-term athlete development program for lacrosse. And he presented it, and it was a absolutely beautiful document. And he put a lot of work in, and it was clear how much work had been put in, because it was very, very good. But a couple of the regions, especially at the lower age groups, weren't so much buying in to it. And it was mainly because they had so much culture and infrastructure, they could bypass that part of the document. So, of course, working with Sport Canada, we wanted this document to be unanimously accepted. And Dwayne and I spoke after or at lunchtime between the meetings, And I said, Dwayne, can we not look to our policy manual, much like the Founders Cup, that segregates the A-tier provinces who send their club teams to the Founders Cup, and the B-tier provinces who don't have that culture and history behind them can send provincial teams. Can we not bring this document along in that sort of fashion? And so he went back to his computer, and over the lunch hour he reworked that section of the document, came back and presented it, and the larger provinces were very, very happy with the changes made. The smaller provinces thought the document was great as well, and it was unanimously accepted. So I'd say that is probably a great example of the differences between the regions. Funny Lacrosse Association, we started in 2002 with 650 families, as I may have said, and it presented some very unique challenges. Having no parents, we had 10 volunteers, and with 650 kids, we had almost 40 teams from the get-go. And we ran our registration early, so we knew we had these numbers. So we had to pick up extra facilities, talk to the towns around the city in St. John to provide us with rink space. We had to find a way to educate our parents who were somewhat standoffish from coaching or refereeing in a game that they weren't familiar with. So we proceeded much like it was a business. And we looked at it and said, how can we bring these parents in and bring them up to speed quickly? Throughout the February, March, and April months, we had secured 2 high school gyms Tuesdays and Thursday nights that we ran skill development purely for parents. We had videos that the CLA had provided us that we had got permission to copy, and gave out 60 or 70 videos that had everything about the game, from team offense to team defense, individual, man up, man down, goaltending, the whole thing. We also, when the season started, we gave the coaches their pre-planned and pre-drawn out practice plans so that they knew exactly what every practice, the first 10 practices, were going to be. As well, we had personnel who had experience in the game at each rink. So if the coach needed a little bit of help with a particular drill, they could just look over, we'd hop on the floor, go out, give them a hand, and hop back off. So the parents really adopted and embraced the fact that we were so willing to and excited to help them become coaches. And so it was a really challenging time. My board of directors and our key volunteers, I looked at them one night and said, well, give your significant others a kiss goodbye, because we're not going to see them for a couple months. So yeah, I brought a little bit of memorabilia, and one piece that is a great story was in 1973. My brother went out to the Canada Summer Games in Burnaby, BC. So my mother and father had a chance to be out there on business, and my father was in government, and he went to a number of the games, but he met his counterpart in British Columbia, who learned he was a lacrosse enthusiast, a lacrosse dad, and invited him to a New Westminster Salmon Bellies game. So they went to see this game, and after the game they were invited down to the dressing room, and so we got a chance to meet a player named Paul Parnell. And interestingly enough, on the east coast of Canada, we knew this name. We had never seen his picture, never seen a game, nothing. But one of our founding players somehow had heard about him, and this folklore started to develop. And when we're playing on the street, you know, someone would make a fantastic shot, and they would be, "Who do you think you are, Paul Parnell?" and that sort of thing. But so my dad got to meet Mr. Parnell, and it was just after the game, and he said, his son was a big fan, and he'd heard his name many times being touted by the kids in the neighborhood. So he took off his jersey and gave it to my father. Well, my father got home before the Team New Brunswick came back, so they had me wear the jersey out to the airport. And I'm a scrawny 12 or 13-year-old, and my brother gets off the airplane and he sees this jersey. And it wasn't too long before I'm rustled to the ground, and then thank God I was wearing a t-shirt, or I would have been leaving there without any shirt on at all. So my brother was very happy to have this and displayed it and wore it a lot, and it's seen better days. But we kept it because it was just such a neat story. It was something our father was involved in, and you know, as it turned out, Mr. Parnell ended up being one of the greats, if not the greatest. So it's really neat to still have this. In one of our CLA meetings in Burnaby, we went to the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame. I told them the story that I had this jersey, and they said, "How can you have, you're on the East Coast? How can you have a jersey?" They didn't believe me. And I offered to send it out to them if they would like to display it, and they politely declined. But so it was much to my joy, because I got to keep it, and I'm here today to show it off. Well, this is a neat story as well. Colin Doyle was running a training camp for kids around the country. And we approached him to come out as we were starting to develop our provincial team. And we wanted to come out and him and his group do some training. And there's he and Blaine Manning and Phil Worthrop, Chris Driscoll, Toronto Rock guys, who most of us knew because the Rock was on TV and it was fun to watch. So they came out, and about halfway through this training camp, I said, "Colin, would it be okay if we did something a little interesting?" And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "We'd like to have like a Masters game with one of our seniors team, with you five, and we'll fill in the blanks just to give you a break on the floor with 5 of us older volunteers." And we called it the Driftwood Challenge. So he said, "That sounds like fun. Let's do it." So we had about 3 or 4 days to print off a bunch of things and give them to the kids at the rink to take home to their parents, put up some posters and that sort of thing. And we used it as a bit of a fundraising project for us. And we ended up putting close to 1,000 people in the rink for this game. And Colin and Blaine and Chris Driscoll and these guys were really, really surprised. A, this crowd came out, and B, the team we were playing kind of got their macho back up and started kind of playing in earnest. But of course, it was they put on a great show, and we raised some money. We had a lot of fun. I got to play with Colin and the guys, and I have great fun talking to some of the younger players. Say, "Yeah, I played with Colin Doyle." Well, as a player, obviously playing competitively, starting out with Nepean as a peewee, playing against them, then moving into Canada Games and Founders Cup, great camaraderie, meeting players that I played against, and then them becoming teammates on our provincial team was a really exciting thing as a young man and a young player. As a coach, watching the young kids get their first goal. I had one team that every player throughout the season had scored a goal except one. So we were coming into the third period, and I said, "No one touches the ball until he gets a goal." And sure enough, within about 3 or 4 minutes into the period, he puts the ball in the net, and the look on his face, I'll never forget it. I also really enjoyed mentoring the young referees, because here's kids going out on the floor who are a year, maybe 2 years older than the players that they're refereeing against. They would find it somewhat intimidating. In our first couple of years, we had a wonderful honeymoon period where the parents, not having the rich culture of lacrosse in our area, parents didn't know the rules. So I'd be reffing right down the floor, and the parents start clapping or cheering. I'd have no idea what just happened to bring this response. But the young referees needed a lot of support from the older referees to just guide them along and teach them how to put up with some of the nonsense referees put up, and how to embrace the joy that officials quite often also have. From an administrative point of view, some of my highlights were obviously being the competition director for the 1985 Canada Games. Our first year in the Funded Lacrosse Association, it was such a task to get that up and running with so many players, the 650 kids on the floor the first year. That was a real highlight, to witness the dedication by a handful of volunteers was truly an honor to be a part of. Taking New Brunswick from 0 minor players to 2,000 players in a period of 3 or 4 years in the early 2000s was I always felt was quite an achievement, and something that I'll see kids that are now still playing, and I look back on those days with a lot of pride. In my CLA activities, had a number of memorable moments. But the drudgery of boardrooms, you could be sitting in a hotel boardroom in St. John, New Brunswick, Banff, Alberta, Vancouver, BC. It wouldn't matter. You're still in a boardroom with no windows. A lot of important business went on, a lot of really important decisions. In my mind, one of the most important was when we brought in the rule that minor lacrosse couldn't have designated defense and designated offensive players, because we wanted to see the players in minor lacrosse gain skill in both sides of the game and go on, and they can then decide once they graduate out of minor how they want to play and what positions they want to play. But that I think was very, very important in the development of minor lacrosse. Sat on equipment review committees and disciplinary committees, but again, I think one of the greatest joys of the CLA was the friendships. I met players I played against in the Founders Cup. I met players that were at the 1985 Canada Games. The Gate brothers played in the Canada Games. I met coaches who were at the Canada Games, John Grant Sr., and working with volunteers like Bill Mcbain and Stu Begg, and staff members around the country, integral to the continuity of lacrosse across the country. You know, Rochelle and Deb out in BC, Stan and Ron and Chris up in Ontario, some of the volunteer guys, Johnny Doherty in Ontario, So and Gill in BC, became good friends over almost a 10-year period of spending hours and hours sitting in boardrooms with them. You really get to know people, and you see really the dedication, the passion. I would come back from these meetings so invigorated because of those meetings. But I'd say from an interest point of view and significance, the minor nationals that piggybacked on the Ontario Festival. The Ontario Festival was a brainchild of Ron Mcbain from the Ontario Lacrosse Association, program director up there. And I remember sitting with Ron way back in like 2002, and he had asked me what I thought of the idea of marrying these two things together. And then he did it. He put it together, and the last count I saw, the festival, including the minor nationals, was running something like 14,000 minor athletes through the venue. And I was very lucky and honored to have been a coach to participate in one of those minor nationals with my daughter playing in the inaugural Bantam Girls Lacrosse National Championships. And so that festival, when parents from the smaller communities went to this festival, and they're surrounded with thousands of parents, thousands of athletes that are passionate about the game, They went home and they were passionate and they became great volunteers. And a lot of the players became our future referees. They became our future coaches. A couple of the referees have gone on to the national level. They've been refereeing at the festival. It was very important. Much like the 73 Canada Games was a catalyst moving me and my group through to the 85 Canada Games, this festival has been a catalyst for many of the smaller regions to build the game as well. Over the years, it's been a pleasure to receive some acknowledgement. I'm not really big on being out front and in the limelight. I prefer to coach, referee, or be behind the scenes at the board levels. But in 2006 or 7, Sport New Brunswick named me the Volunteer Administrator of the Year for the province of New Brunswick. That was nice. Interestingly enough, the weekend that awards dinner took place, I had to be at a CLA meeting in Ottawa, so I missed receiving the award. However, I had someone stand in for me, and in the paper they had a big picture of Steve O'Shaughnessy, our chief referee, with my name underneath it. But I would say the biggest, most significant award that and very personal, through my volunteer activities with lacrosse, I was nominated at the CLA level to receive the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. And that was significant to me because my father had received the Queen's Silver and Gold Jubilee Medal, and my grandfather had received the Coronation Medal. And so our family has a deep tradition of volunteerism, and I would encourage anyone to get involved in volunteering because it can be very, very, truly rewarding.